James, could you give us your views on why innovation within construction, in your opinion, is difficult?
You look at what are the barriers to innovation and adoption, and there are three. There's a lack of leadership. There's a heavily bureaucratic environment. And then there's a lack of support around change. And construction is totally bureaucratic now. It is.
James, people who are building technology and one of their customers is someone like GPE, what advice can you give to them?
Focus on the problem that you're solving. Don't tell them the solution. Listen to them. Look at, if they're a publicly listed company, look at the incentives of the directors. Work out if they've got any measurements against technology or innovation. And try and target them so that you're making their lives not only easier, but more profitable.
James, how do you see generative AI disrupting what we do? And how many phone calls do you get per day of people or clients asking you, tell me about AI?
So I'm going to give you the optimistic future here, which is that the chance to optimize design in shape, height, form, carbon consumption, cost, and iterate plenty of opportunities much earlier, I think is a science reality in 12 to 24 months, based on the IP of organizations that are already starting to work on it. And as far as clients asking me about generative design, generative AI, it's not as many as you think. It should be more. But it's more fundamentally, we've got a real problem and we don't know how to unlock it yet. So it's, can you help us do that? So yeah, there's always room for more clients.
James, the last one for me is about mentors and how they, if you had any, and how they shape what you do right.
Well, mentors are amazing, but you should definitely find people that are willing to, if you can find somebody who's willing to give their time to you, it's such a precious resource and commodity.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Bricks and Bytes podcast, where we dive into construction and AEC technology. Before we get started though, if you're a startup founder or operator responsible for innovation in your company, or you want a deeper, more insightful look into technology in AEC, you won't want to miss our newsletter. From deep dives into particular technologies such as AI, robotics, design, software, and so on. Hot takes from investors betting big in AEC technology, and advice on building tech companies, including the stories and takeaways of the most successful AEC technology founders. Head over to www.bricks-bytes.com and sign up today to get this exclusive material straight to your inbox. And now for the episode.
This episode is brought to you by Build Vision, transforming construction supply chain by bringing contractors, manufacturers, and stakeholders onto a single software platform. Visit buildvision.io to find out.
All right, good afternoon, guys. It's nice to have you with us today, James. So, James, could you give? I will let you do the introduction because going through your LinkedIn is rather impressive. Your background and some of the positions you held. So, yeah, nothing like blowing your own trumpet, hey, and the opportunity to do that in front of our audience. So, go for it.
So I'm James Pellatt. I'm the founder of a consultancy called Digital Trees. I've worked in real estate my whole career. I've been very fortunate. I've never had any doubts that I wanted to work in real estate. I've just worked in different roles. I started off as a building surveyor, moved into project management and worked for various developers. Built More London. I built the GLA headquarters. I then moved to an American developer called Tishman Spire, and then until recently was a director of Great Portland Estates, where I had two roles. One was head of projects, so I was in charge of delivery of the development program, and then director of innovation. So I pivoted my career about 7 or 8 years ago, moving into technology. And that led me to doing what I do now, which is to help anybody involved in real estate and construction with digital transformation. Because what I came to realize is that a lot of people are afraid of it and scared of it. They don't really understand the benefits of what it can do. And I speak both languages, and I sit as a translator in the middle.
Yeah, what I find really interesting and exciting about you is that you've been in the traditional world heavily early on in your career, and then moving traditional world from a construction perspective, and people operating, let's say, more on the boots on the ground style. And now you're in and have been involved with the tech side of things, but from the more client, employer, owner, whatever you want to call it, perspective as well. So you have seen the breadth.
Yeah, not exclusively, because there are some consultants and some contractors that I'm advising to. So what's been interesting is since I've sort of moved away and formed this consultancy, I've got approaches from people that I didn't necessarily expect to get. So that's been a very pleasant surprise, and seeing the innovation that is going on in construction companies as well. So that's been good to see.
James, can you tell us a little bit more about what do you do day to day? What type of clients or problems your clients have, and are they in the UK or elsewhere?
So the clients I have a few of them operate solely in the UK. Some of them are across Europe. Some of them are expanding into the US, and a lot of them are backed by international investors. So the work is mostly Europe and US, I would say, but 80% in the UK. And I work for large landed real estate companies. I work for smaller startup developers or fledgling developers, and various different consultants or tech companies as well. I've given them all advice. So everything from data centers to digital twins and everything in between.
And can you tell us an example or two of the problems that they have and they come to you with?
They all have problems. And if there's one fundamental theme, which is we know that we've got to do something, but we don't know what, and we don't know how to understand it. That's the overriding question that I get. That's kind of my sweet spot. And then there's any number of subsets of questions that the industry is facing, that they're facing as organizations. And what I do, and that's a key part of how I help them, is that because I've got all these years of experience of working in the built environment, I can understand their problem or their business plan. I understand where they want to get to. I've often done lots of change myself in those worlds. But they're also, I understand what the potential technology solutions might be to help them. So it's sort of bringing the two things together. So what I'll do is I'll listen and engage with their teams. I'll listen to their problems. I'll synthesize that around a group of themes, align it to the business plan, and also then show them the art of the possible. So here are things that might help you. You might want to consider this. I'm independent. I'm vendor agnostic, solution agnostic. I'm trying to find the best solutions for them. And that's it. That's a unique selling point, because other consultancies sort of always have some baggage around them to sell a much bigger consultancy engagement or a much bigger digital transformation project or some software that's going to be deployed. Whereas I truly sit in the middle and don't care. I mean, I care as much that I want them to succeed. I probably have favored solutions, but ultimately it's up to them to decide which one's right for them.
Yeah. And are you improving perhaps it from a process perspective or like tech adoption? Hey listeners, I want to take a quick break to remind you about the Bricks and Bytes newsletter. If you're interested in learning about the technology shaping the future of construction, you won't want to miss the valuable insights we share each week. To get this exclusive content delivered straight to your inbox, head over to www.bricks-bytes.com and sign up today. Link is in the show notes. Back to the show.
Both. I don't go into sale process at first, but here's a really good example. One of our clients is a developer called Bywater Properties. It's run by two very bright people who've been working in development for 15 so years. They're backed by a Japanese investor called Sumitomo Forestry, and they came to me with the solution. Say, what does good look like? What can we do? And it was quite clear early on that they didn't have processes in place. They hadn't really thought about them. And we recently did a process mapping exercise. And in the room, as we looked around the room, literally going through the whole life cycle of a development, from finding the site to designing the project, to building the project, to finishing it, to handing it over, they suddenly looked around and said, what would happen if we improved every piece? Because this is the way the status quo is kind of inefficient. So what could we do if we actually tried to do this differently? And that was so exciting for me. That was a really, really pivotal moment that I managed to get a client with a growth mindset to stand back and to think about the art of the possible in that way.
Do you think that people that come to you, they're coming because there is a shrinking bottom line on their P&Ls, or maybe they see there is technology out there and they are having FOMO as they are not using any of that?
I think the answer is yes to both. Right? It's not so much as a shrinking P&L. I think it is as much that the market conditions, that for a decade or so, we all enjoyed this low interest rate environment that hid a load of inefficiency, particularly as we came out of the global financial crisis. So I think 10 years ago, the incentives and the initiatives in the sort of UK construction industry were the BIM mandate had just come out. So actually, that's 2011, the BIM mandate came out. And that was a very positive thing because it wasn't absolute stick, you must. It was a carrot to say, if you want to get government work in 5 years' time, you need to learn these skills to do that. Arguably, if it had sort of been absolutely enforced, it would have forced that adoption. But it was a really good, there was a roadmap, there was a time scale, there was a pathway to follow. And it was a godsend to me as a developer to use that and use that adoption as a private developer. And so we did, but equally, not everybody had to. So when interest rates were so low, you just hired more people. We didn't have Brexit, we didn't have COVID, then we had inflation. And then that's what's making people think we can't keep hiring people. And that coupled with, November 22, ChatGPT gets released, and all of a sudden these large language models have started to do things which seemed like science fiction. But that point of the construction industry has a lot of documentation, but it has very little data. And when I mean data from a truly like technological sense of the world. So is that suddenly in a pathway to making these things happen, and for leaders to ask themselves a question going, there's something in this AI stuff. I've got to be able to have an answer, or at least I've got to credibly explain to my board or to investors why we are doing something or why we're not doing something or what we are trying. And so that's those three factors are the thing that's sort of unlocking what's happening.
So you would look at like the entire perhaps workflow of a company, like you did for your client you previously mentioned. And then you would say, okay, here is an area, I don't know, let's just say like creation of proposals or whatever it might be. And then you would say, okay, here are like 5 tools that you could implement. And go and, but I don't know if you I think you mentioned that you don't really, or you insinuated that you don't recommend one as such, but you
look, but I will say here are 5.
Yep.
Or here, and also, a lot of people say, well, I don't know if I can back that one or I can back this one because they seem young. Are they going to be around? Do they actually do what they want to do? So I can give them sort of that measured risk perspective of saying, I think these have got a lot of potential, but they are a startup. But it's a safe bet that if you, in fact, ironically, if you're willing to work with this startup, you might find them shaping the product to suit you, and the return on you working with them in that early start of the process is that you're getting something that's actually fitting your problems, not the other way around. So, that's not a comfortable place for every organization. They don't want to do that necessarily. But if you're going through with your eyes open, then it's not, it's not a major risk. And there's nothing yet which is so risky, that's so young, that you couldn't cope with it if it didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
So before we dive maybe deeper into technology, I just wanted to ask a broader question, like all in your views on technology adoption in the UK, US, and Europe.
I laugh because we had a good chat about this before, James.
I read the notes.
Yeah. So the way that it works is that the US is definitely further ahead in terms of wanting to try a new idea. Like the whole economy was built on innovation and someone succeeding. So there is a willingness to see somebody succeed and to grow and to try. And you see quite a few pockets of companies like Suffolk that think about this and think about how we can invest this. We can make some investments ourselves, and this will benefit us, and we'll get better in what we do. I think there's also just like fundamental differences between procurement generally in the US to procurement in the UK and procurement in Europe. I saw that a lot when I was at Tishman Speyer, and I spent a lot of my time translating construction. It seems really odd to think that you'd have to do that, but they're not common languages necessarily. And you kind of see it with Procore. Like Procore as a product is really good, but people in Europe are going, it's okay, but I'm having to find workarounds for it because it's set up for a US market and it's not necessarily set for a European one.
Is it
and I'm not
different?
Yeah, it is. It is that different. And if you look at people who are going the other way, another startup company that I love, it's called Qflow. And Brittany's busy expanding Qflow to the US. Thought she was going to mostly work on the East Coast and is now generally working in the Midwest, mostly in the data center market, because the fit that she's getting is in compliance around data centers. So it sort of shows that there's just a very different way. Like QS, cost consultants don't really exist as a service in the US. You don't go to a cost consultant like you do here. And a lot of American, what value does a cost consultant serve? The sooner they're out of business, the better. Like they don't see it as a value add. And I'm not knocking that. I'm just saying that that's a prime example. Things like engineering are kind of the same, but even the way that you engineer and design a building is very different from the US to Europe. And then now you have this complete bifurcation. It used to be that America was ahead on innovation and Europe was ahead on sustainability. And I kind of thought, if they came together mid-Atlantic, that would be the answer. And now clearly America's taken a right turn, and that sort of climate tech is not something which is probably going to get as much attention based on early indications. Whereas in Europe, it's much more advanced and much more understood. So I think that's the difference.
It reminds me of there was a funny meme going around. Maybe you saw it of European versus US innovation. And you kind of just always described it there, James. And there was a picture on one side with like a US flag, and it had a picture of the Falcon. Is it the Falcon X, which landed back from orbit and they built the rocket? And then on the right-hand side, it had a European flag, and it was like, those bottles that we have with the where the lid doesn't fall off the bottle.
Yeah.
And I think that was just such a great picture to kind of, well, almost summarize what you said and also summarize how perhaps innovation differs between US and UK. I also find that the mindset over there is like is different when it comes to innovation. Where people I was having this conversation with us the other day, is people in the US. Look, this is a sample size of one conversation, but not that they enjoy being sold to, but they're more open to the idea of being sold to versus European people who.
I think everything is a transaction, and you know where you stand, right? You kind of know exactly whether somebody's interested or they're not interested. I mean, there's a dreadful expression, I don't know if I could throw it, but they can like grin fuck you. Just like, yeah, that's great. Yeah, it's amazing. It's the best thing ever. And you can leave a meeting thinking, wow, that's it. I've cracked America out, moving out there. This is what we're doing. And then you hear nothing.
Yeah.
But generally, you kind of know where you stand pretty quickly. Whereas in Europe, okay, we're interested. Yeah, no, we're really interested. Oh, no, yeah, come. Oh, yeah, and it like is next month.
Love it.
And we don't say that we don't want to do it. We're not very good at sort of being clear and giving feedback, which is a real shame, I think. And I think the other thing is generally founders. I mean, I'm full of admiration for founders. If people are willing to sort of go out and do something, they're a lot less ambitious in Europe than they are in the US. Like they're quite more open, saying, I want to make $5 million. That's what I'm going to go and do. And I'm going to make this and I'm going to raise this money. Whereas you talk to most European founders and you say, how much money do you want to make? They won't necessarily feel comfortable answering it because they haven't necessarily thought of it themselves. They're kind of more purpose-led.
You still want the esters.
Is it because of the size of the European markets and fragmentation of them, or just
possibly culturally? I suspect it's more culturally than it is. I think every country's got an example of a company that's done well in Europe. You can think of all sorts of examples, whether it's Spotify in Sweden or BMW in Germany, or whatever those things are. There's always something in a country that's managed to sort of break out, but there's not. There's just not the same scale from Europe going the other way.
So let me ask you about from PyLab's point of view. You're a venture partner there. Do you see? So there's Europe has a lot of property, existing real estate. And so do you think the technology which is provided to this real estate in various shape and form is coming from the US led startups or perhaps from European startups? I don't know.
I would say it's about 70% Europe, 30% US.
So we're good in doing something at least.
Yeah, but the scale. What you didn't ask me is what's the scale of adoption.
Plus, the scale of prop tech in Europe is a very big sore point for a lot of people as well as a discussion point.
Yeah,
that's interesting. Why did you point out what's the scale of adoption?
Because I think that the scale of adoption is much lower in Europe than it is in the US. So that's why. So you can get a quicker market share from a US-based company in terms of sales through, because the S&P 500 is so big. If you serve one company in the S&P 500, that can be enough to get you enough revenue to get you through Series A or not to Series B, but it's like kind of enough to get the wheels spinning. Whereas to do that in Europe is a lot harder. You have challenges. It's not easy to just, it's a common misconception thinking that if I sold to a US investment bank, then I'm going to get rolled out across the US. But they still have East Coast, West Coast, Central divisions. They can't, everyone has a division. They have a matrix of some kind. But generally speaking, if you can crack it, you can scale quicker in the US than you can in Europe.
Thanks for this insight. I've not thought about it this way. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. James, could you give us your views on why innovation within construction, in your opinion, is difficult? I mean, actually, opinion, experience, maybe fact as well.
It's difficult because when about 5 years ago, I decided to go back to university to teach myself this stuff. So I did a part-time course at MIT, and you look at what are the barriers to innovation and adoption, and there are three. There's a lack of leadership. There's a heavily bureaucratic environment, and then there's a lack of support around change. And construction is totally bureaucratic now. It is. I think if we all, like, whenever we started our careers, when we started to where we are now, the reporting that's required has increased significantly. And people are wanting to know what's going on. And they think that to do that, they need a report to make that happen. So there's a lot more reporting. And for the right reasons, your environmental reporting didn't exist 10 years ago. It now exists today, right? So you've got to do that as well. So bureaucracy is massively increased. And the lack of leadership is, I think the leadership is not within the construction companies, because I think there is some that's good. I think it's the leadership from clients that's missing. I think fundamentally, clients don't equip themselves in the most intelligent way to deal with procurement. Like it becomes a zero-sum game, and a lot of clients think they can protect themselves because they'll hire someone from a contractor or from a contracting experience. And the problem with that is that, not in all cases, but in a lot of cases, someone who goes from a contractor side to a client side suddenly feels like they've got, like, I'm the client and people are going to listen to what I'm going to say.
Finally.
Yeah, finally. But the truth is that they're not really suited. You're suddenly playing with live ammunition because what you say has an action. And one of the things that I wanted to do at GPE, and we did, was, because if you really boil it down to its essence, the interest of a contractor and the interest of a client are the same, which is, I want you to finish this building to the best quality to that date. And if I'm really smart as a client, I want you to make money too. And I want everybody on the job to make money. That shouldn't be a dirty word, but we start off at a point going, no, you're making too much money and you're ripping me off, and I'm going to do everything I can to stop that from happening. But if it's the myth of design and build contracting. Like if I've managed all my risk because I've transferred it all to this contractor.
No, you didn't.
But you haven't really, because if you're 6 months late, you've protected some of your risk, but the interest costs or the loss of income that you're struggling to get because you haven't finished that building are massively in excess of whatever you're claiming back from that contractor. And that to me is the oxymoron. So it's kind of the point of, I'm not saying you shouldn't have contractual liabilities, but if you approached it from the point that this isn't a zero-sum game, what is it that's going to be the barrier? How do we remove the barrier to success? So we had principals meeting, and what I used to ask for in the principals meeting was not what are the top 3 things that are going to affect the successful outcome of the project. And I was trying to get to a point of honesty and confrontation, not to say that you're rubbish, but is to say, I'm really worried about the stonework because we're not getting enough of it, or whatever the thing was, and be able to honestly say, yeah, okay, and for the contractor to say, yeah, we do have a problem with that supply. What might we do to resequence it to make that happen? Because ultimately, you want the stone to be finished in the right quality at the right place, and that does. And we got there, but we didn't quite get there, because what happened was, as soon as we got to the design and build part of the contract, the main contractor would say, right, nobody say anything bad in front of James. And it was like going, it took me ages to work out, right? It was, this is what was going wrong. And then I'd sort of but you had to kind of applaud when someone was honest and go, oh, thank you for telling me that. That's really good. I'm really pleased you've told me that you screwed up or that this is messed up. And you kind of had to say it in a happy face, but you had to encourage this out because what you really want to know is where's my risk and what can I manage? And this is why I'm kind of excited now about the future, because I can see a pathway to shifting procurement so that the sort of successful alignment of goals can become more readily available.
Is it a matter of transparency? Because based on what you said, seems to me like this. And is there a tool that can facilitate this, like brutal transparency between the client and contractor?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what's required, really, right? Someone is not saying something, and the other side comes.
So what I think it is the point at which there is an open dialogue. Brutal transparency, I think, is like kind of. I think that's a bit too far. I don't think you need to go that far, but I do think you need to say, look. So one of the things I'm really interested in is what are the number of site inductions every day and what trade is having it, or Qflow, which is another reason why I love Qflow, right? Qflow break down deliveries by trade contractor. So they will tell me that trade contractor X has this a load of non-material deliveries. Something's been delivered to site that has to go back because it's not the right thing. Well, there's your leading indicator. Because if they don't have the right plasterboard or whatever it is that they need to fix, that's where you're going to have a delay in your program, right? So why not? What is it? You just think, what's going wrong there? Why aren't they on top of this thing? And it may be the cause of that may be that there was there was a design change or whatever it was, further up the line, but it's a leading indicator. Who's being inducted? If it's dry liners and you're getting the high turnover of dry liners, it means, because everyone's like 70% of labor on site is subcontracted anyway. So they're all voting with their feet. And if you're getting new inductions, it means that you're not paying someone enough or they're not making enough money, which means you're not making enough progress. Those are the leading indicators. And the dream is that developer and a contractor agree 5 things that they want to measure simply. Like, is the number of another great friend and contractor, Jason Carey, who runs Carey's. He was telling me about a project in which there was a rule at which by the end of the month, they had a red, amber, green status on all variations on the account. And the idea being that no variation goes through to the next month's valuation or within 28 days of it being raised where it doesn't go green. So everybody knew where they stood financially through the job. And he would much rather work on that job, which is outside of, it's in not remote Scotland, but it's not like direct, because he knows exactly where he stands. He knows when he's going to make some money. And frankly, given a high profile project in London, you do not know where you stand, and you can be waiting months for your money. And that behavior is driven by clients, not by, it is driven by contractors as well. Let's not be wrong, but you kind of got to get away from the blame culture into a transparency culture.
I think I have a couple of anecdotes. One on the bureaucracy part is that I was speaking to someone and they were telling me that some projects that they're involved with, because of the nature of the contract and the way that the project has been procured and all the history up to signing of the contract was so, let's say, adversarial, that from day one, they had a claims team on site, like just taking records, preparing for the claim that they were going to make against the contractor or against the client, whatever. I'm not sure which way around it was, but how absolutely ridiculous is that? That you are paying someone a salary to sit there and just collect records and take paper just in case, and probably because it will happen.
Yeah, that's a fault in culture, I think.
And multiply that out, right? So say let's say how much, let's assume they're earning 60 grand a year. 3 people earning 60 grand a year doing that role. I've got no idea what the rates are, but that's 180 grand.
Yeah.
And then you've got the subcontractors have each also got to have someone who's doing that too. So probably the on cost of that may be 500,000 to 750 grand that you're paying in prelims as a client.
Yeah.
But do you want to invest 200k in some technology that's going to help you do the same thing? No, I've been doing that. That's the contractor's job. Why shouldn't the contractor pay for that? But and you just think, why, like, kind of see where the costs are and what you're backing that up to, and that's where you kind of shift this towards, I think.
Yeah. Also, another one to share on about James, what you were saying. I could just picture this in my head. Like, James, you go into a meeting and everyone going quiet. They're like, "Shh, James is here now. James is here." Like, don't change the tone of the meeting. But what I think is interesting is a large element of it is human nature, and especially in like the corporate world, is by the time the information gets to you, it's been filtered by however many levels. So what I was listening to a bit recently, and what the leader or founder, CEO, whoever it was, of UPS, which is the delivery company, I think it's born out of US. That's also here. Brown vans, you wouldn't miss them in London.
Yeah.
If he ever saw a delivery driver whilst he was just driving around, he would always stop and get out and speak to them and be like, "Oh, so what's actually going on?" Because he said by the time his like executive team had told him, he was like, he wasn't even sure he could really believe them, what was coming out of their mouth. So to hear it, from the boots on the ground was a different perspective.
Yeah, and again, I think the intelligent construction director for a client should meet your subcontractors regularly. I used to do it because you hear from them privately which jobs are going badly, why are they going badly. You kind of got the sense on the ground much quicker. I mean, you kind of got to do both things, and but to me, if you're not making the time to speak to the means of production, you're missing a point or missing an opportunity. Put it that way.
What is a little bit sad in all of this, I think, is that this is like a cultural problem, not nothing else really. Legacy kind of issue of we've always been doing things this way, and not willing to change things. That's the which is not going to set us closer to the US way of thinking here.
Yeah, and I can't pretend. It's been a good decade or so now since I've been involved in any construction project in the US, so I can't really say for sure. But let's not pretend they're all like lacing daisies through each other's hair, and it's all love and peace over there too, right? I'm sure it's not. Well, but equally, other things like you realize that if you took a tower in New York and a tower in London and a tower in Frankfurt, the tower in New York is simpler to build than the tower in London and the tower in Frankfurt. And I had to sort of explain. Again, it was that sort of translation point, but you can be building on bedrock in New York, so foundations aren't as big a thing. So piling is a different issue. But equally in Frankfurt, but you can. This is an interesting example. Deutsche Bank had headquarters in 3 cities. So they're all Deutsche Bank employees. They're all for a global organization. And they all have different specifications. Because culturally in Germany, you're prepared to work in a building that is warmer. It hasn't got to be chilled down to 20 degrees in the summer. It hasn't got to run 24 hours a day. And you can open a window. The cladding in London is more expensive because we're building on a curvy street pattern. So the buildings are a funny shape, which means the cladding's a funny shape, but we've got a higher prevailing wind. So you had to think of all of this stuff as to why is it more expensive to do anywhere. And the interesting example is Tokyo, is Japan. So I saw a number of people who've got Japanese clients, and they're good friends of mine. Did a field study trip to to Tokyo to sort of understand why the tower that they were building in London, why was it more expensive than the tower in Tokyo? And bearing in mind, Tokyo Tower has to have earthquake dampers and shock absorbers, right? And Tokyo is cheaper. If you took out that dampening part of it, Tokyo is cheaper to build and quicker and more efficient. So kind of why is that? And we've lost this point of looking at excellence. We haven't even touched on the Middle East, right? So if there is one place on the planet that should be advancing this more than anywhere else, it should be the Middle East. And it's why you do see, in fairness, you do see companies like Innovo, whose like name is in the title, that they are essentially a contractor developer wanting to innovate in what they're doing. But I'm not sure that PIF or the Saudi government have really embraced the opportunity to innovate as much as they could have done. Because they kind of should be leading the world to show you this is how it could be done. Maybe they are, maybe that's come out, but I haven't seen it so far.
A very interesting example of these towers is I've got experience is much smaller construction type, and I can see same thing that it's way complicated construction, at least here in the UK, compared to where I'm from, which is Poland, and it is way more prone to failure. Structures and the waterproofing here as well. So it's just more complicated and more prone to failure. So it's very puzzling to me. It's been puzzling to me, but
yeah.
James, could you give us some examples of technology that you have seen have significant impact? Maybe you already mentioned a few like Qflow, but yeah.
So I think things that are having significant impact, there's some that are quite old. One of my other roles is I'm a board member of a company called Elikosoft, and they have Ask the Power project as sort of core product, which lots of your listeners will use and have used for 20, 30 years, right? So the ability to use planning software to plan a construction project, that's established and it's been there for a long time. And it's, we kind of forget that there are examples in the industry. I think things like Autodesk, not very well loved, but it's really interesting where they're moving to with the construction cloud and trying to extend this construction information into operations. I think that's an interesting development, that it might take away from these common data environments and I've seen people like JP Morgan insist that all of their information is going into the construction cloud. So they're starting to unify where that information comes from. But then I'm seeing some really exciting startups like Howie and Layout that are using generative AI to come up with answers or find things quicker, find information quicker, or design floors quicker. So I'm optimistic that there's now, people can, there's a business case to do it, right? Which is we can't keep up with this bureaucracy. There is a way to find information quicker. There is a way to organize it quicker that can save us time. And if it saves us time, either you could save prelims, right? You should be able to reduce prelims in a construction contract, or that you're also going to comply with the Building Safety Act or whatever else it is you're going to try and do, that you've now got a legislative requirement to show where you get to. So, and I do think Revit and I do think BIM has worked, right? It didn't seem like it 15 years ago, but now, especially in the UK, it's quite interesting between what happens in the UK, where adoption is pretty standard and pretty straightforward, to Germany, where it's still treated with a degree of suspicion and it hasn't got as much adoption, although it's recently starting to catch up. So I think there's pockets everywhere that you can see where it's working.
I think we recently heard from a venture capitalist in construction who said something like if I see one more startup, I'm probably paraphrasing incorrectly, that is improving the speed of finding information, that I consider it as not so relevant. I think the conclusion was that it's going to become a commodity, that everyone will be able to eventually build a startup that is doing something quicker. And that was not considered as significant improvement or technological improvement. Have you got any thoughts on that?
Mine, actually, the person that said that was a general contractor of a probably multi-billion-dollar company in the US.
Okay. I don't know. Somehow I thought it was Patrick.
No, it definitely wasn't Patrick. I won't name who it was, but it was, yeah.
So
Like
for
a
the record,
significant contractor in the US.
Then I kind of think he should spend half an hour in his estimating office to see just how much time his team is spending, right? So I've literally, before this call, was on a pitch from exactly that sort of company. And they were working for a government, they're doing quite a lot of work in government departments. And they basically confirmed what I'm finding from my clients is that people are spending between 20 and 30% of their working week collating, preparing, or waiting for information for a report. And most boards can't accept that number. They can't believe it's true. And I find that really depressing statement because, yeah, okay, so what? But you might as well say if you're kind of bemoaning the fact there aren't more innovative solutions, fair enough. Okay, that's fine. But if you're saying there's too many of them, okay, that's fine too. But how many of them are you actually deploying then? And how are you not seeing that benefit within your organization? That's the truth is that it's still very early stages for that whole use case. So I think we can all understand it now a lot better than we did. Making it work practically is a much different issue.
Do you have customers or people you speak with who are searching for particular types of technology? Is there any trend within those asks right now?
You get pockets of things like especially around smart buildings, increasingly around digital twins. A year ago, there was little or no interest in that. Now there's increasing interest in that. So I think people are beginning to see the pathway to operation further than they were looking at before. But there's still, like that, if you talk about gaps, that is a chasm as wide as the Grand Canyon. You've got people who deliver buildings on one side of it, and you've got people who operate them on the other side, and there's very little understanding or interface in between the two. So I think this smart building piece, which is long being promised, is starting to gain signs of maturity.
So where does the smart building start? Does it start in the design phase, or does it start after handover and during the life cycle of the building?
No, it starts at briefing stage before you appointed your design team. The client should know why they want one, what they want it for. And if it doesn't start there, it's going to get increasingly more expensive the later you deploy it. And probably you won't deploy it.
Mm-hmm.
Is it a matter of, Joe? Sorry, go on.
Okay. Well, so an example of that is that a development we did for GPE called the Hickman, and it became the world's first platinum-rated smart school building, which I was very proud of, which is why I drop it every time I'm in a conversation. But but that was through us working out that we needed it. We were going to use a BIM model anyway, and we wanted to see what would happen if you could extend it for its life cycle. Right. So what happened if you did connect it to the building management system and the operations? What happened if you did connect it to the workplace app that was improving customer satisfaction and understanding what's going on so it could become more sustainable? And the cost premium for it wasn't that much. It was tens of thousands, not hundreds of thousands.
On
But
what
if you-
sort of scale? Like how many millions, or what's
The building contract was 25 million, I think. But I think the truth is that it shouldn't cost you a lot more if you're saying this is what I want to do from the beginning, and the things that you're procuring anyway are open source that can be read by a code. Then why should it cost you more? And this is the huge myth around smart buildings. And you kind of think, I've got to put sensors everywhere, doing everything, when you don't really, because you don't really need that much information. You don't. What is it? If you think through what is it you want to use from the beginning, and there might be 10 absolute use cases that you need to measure. That's more worthwhile. And I'm saying, look, there was a cost in creating the BIM model, and I'm just to be clear, I can't remember what that. So that was 150 grand. But I know for a fact that for that 150 grand, saved another 300 grand, at least. Oh, yeah. So I don't take that as a cost in my head. I just know that for every pound we save, we generally save two. For every pound we spend, we save £2 in the construction contract. And it was an absolute obvious thing to do. And that's why it's core to Great Portland Estates now, to any major development. That's what they do, is record.
Do they have to have experienced the savings in order to know that it's good and implement it on every project moving forward? Because I think what's quite hard, and we touched upon this a little bit earlier, is actually, people say one thing and you're speaking to the sales department and they're like, look, for every pound you spend, you'll save £2. And you're going to be like, yeah, piss off, mate. Like, you're just trying to sell me a solution. So is it a matter of you kind of have to take a punt and be like, yeah, we'll try it?
Yes. The short answer, yes. Because it's very difficult to prove an ROI.
Yeah.
And but that's why, going back to the beginning, that's why I set up Digital Trees, which was to say, look, you're not necessarily going to demonstrate a cash saving from this point, but what is the problem you're trying to solve? And if the problem is that you want to get to a net zero carbon building, and that's the definition now means that you've got to monitor performance, you've got to measure embodied carbon, and you've got to monitor performance afterwards, then you're going to need technology to help you support that. It is impossible to do that without the technology in place. And that does deliver a value in a sharper yield at the end when you sell the building. And that the market has proven that the investors will pay more for a long-term sustainable building than they want for one that isn't. As they become more sophisticated and they understand more, that's when they get to see more. So, but we didn't know that at GP when we started, but we did find it out by the time it came to an end. And you kind of got to look at it as a de minimis cost, which is to say, like it comes, maybe now you could say, this is the trouble with them. A lot of people say, oh, my 3D fly-through will save you 20% on the construction cost because it will avoid any wasted work. Well, it won't save 20% because unless you're working on CN or a cost-plus contract, you're never going to see that saving. So those claims become ridiculous is the wrong word. I find them, that this is the unfortunate thing, that you don't have to do it. And this is why I could be completely wasting my time doing what I'm doing. Because you can still operate in real estate, you can still operate in construction, and you can still make money without digitizing, without technology. I can't argue against that. All I can argue is that if you invest in it, if you invest in organizing your data, then the intellectual property that you have will be greater than that of your competitor. And whilst you may not thank yourself today, you will thank yourself in 5 years' time. I know contractors, subcontractors that have reduced their business line from 9 business units to 2 business units. There's 7 business units. Didn't make any money. We're never going to make any money. And so I'll focus on what's going to make me money. And until you sort of kind of get to that point, you're never going to be profitable or smart enough to work out what it is. So that is what I think is kind of the the holy grail here. So you invest in and you organize whatever it is, whether you're a quantity surveyor, whether you're a subcontractor, whether you're a cladding delivery company, whatever it is, invest in your own IP. And from that point, it will look after itself down the line.
James, people who are building technology and one of their customers is someone like GPE, what advice can you give to them?
Focus on the problem that you're solving. Don't tell them a solution. Listen to them. Look at, if they're a publicly listed company, look at the incentives of the directors. Work out if they've got any measurements against technology or innovation. And try and target them so that you're making their lives not only easier, but more profitable.
Okay. I have got...
Hey, start.
That one, simply put, that's it. That's kind of it.
Okay. How do you vet / evaluate similar technologies? So that is with reference to our earlier conversation when you mentioned when you give your customers, let's say, 5 different technologies that can solve their problem. So I guess some of them are overlapping. How do you figure out like what's if people building it and the software or hardware is really, really good?
So again, hopefully what will happen with my clients is that if they want to continue working with us, we will have issued a request for proposal from the tech companies, but we'll know exactly why our clients are wanting to use this. So the sort of use case is kind of well defined. The success criteria should be well defined. And you may have 2 or 3, you certainly have 3 or 4 companies who all claim to do the same thing. So how do you evaluate whether they do the same thing? And it's a bit like selecting a contractor for a building project or a trade contractor. Some will come a close second. Some will show real promise, and you're kind of thinking that was really hard. But one of the things that a boss of mine made me do at GP and then forced it on the rest of the team was we had a rule that like everybody wants the glory phone call saying, "Hey, you've won the job. Great. You want to make the glory call." But we said you could never make the glory call unless you'd made the sorry call. And the reason for that is that if you've got to confront someone verbally as to why they haven't won the job, it makes you think in terms of constructive feedback. Why because it's a bond thing. Like, worst thing is you ghost someone, just say, "Oh, you were too expensive," and don't talk to them again after like months of effort on their end. But if you offer a constructive criticism, I believe that's how you improve. And just say, the reason you didn't get it was because of this. And if it's like, again, honest feedback, they may not like it. And there's plenty of times when people have blown up in my face and accused me of all sorts of things. But equally, if it's from a point of truth, then deep down they'll acknowledge that point, and your relationship is actually stronger. So, and you can say, right, genuinely for the next time, you are on this list. And the other thing is that anybody who's on a list, you shouldn't be doing it to fill up numbers. It should be genuinely, I am open to any one of you getting this work, and the best idea wins.
Interesting. I would even go a step further and to the winning bid. I would call them and say, "Oh, you didn't win it," and see how they react, and then will reevaluate my mind about that. Because if they go at you, then you know type of people you're dealing with, perhaps.
I think the stakes are a little bit too high at that point, right? Because you may have discounted everyone else, then you finally discounted this person, and you're like, "Oh shit, we need to go back to the person that we just discounted and tell them actually."
And you know what? The people that I kind of respect the most, took it equally as well in both ways.
Exactly.
I am actually working with some of those people now. So yeah, that's an interesting point.
James, how do you see generative AI disrupting what we do? And how many phone calls do you get per day of people or clients asking you tell me about AI?
So I'm going to give you the optimistic future here, which is that the chance to optimize design in shape, height, form, carbon consumption, cost, and iterate plenty of opportunities much earlier, I think is a science reality in 12 to 24 months, based on the IP of organizations that are already starting to work on it. And that, I think, fundamentally shifts procurement and how you build things, because I think that if you were able to tender the M&A on a building without the subcontractors, so you knew exactly what equipment you were providing, you can actually go from 50% design to 80 to 90% design. And if you're then tendering on that point, contractors should do what they're best at, which is security, logistics, and how things get built together. And designers should do what they do too. And I think that shortens the overall period for delivery by 12 to 18 months. So like, instead of it taking 5 to 6 years, I think you can do it in 4.5. And that, to me, is the optimistic future that I think you can get to. So, and as far as clients asking me about generative design, generative AI, it's not as many as you think. It should be more. But it's more fundamentally, we've got a real problem and we don't know how to unlock it yet. So it's, can you help us do that? So yeah, there's always room for more clients.
So you're saying that there is a very big disruption coming to the design space, I guess, architect,
design and construction.
Design and construction. But this will primarily have an impact on the designers' workflows, perhaps, right? Obviously, on the construction and tendering as well. But the construction companies will be beneficiaries of that, whereas design companies will have to very quickly adapt to make sure that they stay relevant.
No, because I think, so the one thing, just to paint this rosy picture, the thing that you're missing is ultimately, if you're building a student housing block or an office or a hospital, whatever it is, you need a warranty to finish that off. And you're not going to take a warranty from a tech company because a tech company is not going to give it. You need a warranty from a designer and a design team. The key question is what do you do with the bandwidth it gives you? So if you can shorten the design period, what I would argue is that the smarter designers can do the fun things that they want to do. They want, architects are the only people really that have full influence over creativity and the part of the process. And they can often come up with the best ideas and the ideas which unlock cities or unlock buildings or unlock concepts. That's what you can focus on. Clients can focus on, again, Bywater believe they are a B Corp company. So it gives them more time to focus on social value. It gives them more time to work on the impact of the development and the surrounding development. And what can we do? That's like the very optimistic future about what happens is, because at the moment it's kind of reductive. It kind of already is, which is unless you're building me a center core square building, then the net to floor ratio isn't good enough, and therefore I can't afford to build this development. We're not doing it anyway. So I would argue at the moment you're kind of stuck with where things go to. So a smart designer will look at this and think, okay, I can reduce my work in progress. I can improve my idea or my creativity, and I can unlock. Because I think the other part of this is the ability to visualize what you're getting can occur much earlier in the process. So we ignore what happens for most real estate clients, in that they find it hard to imagine things, which is why you get a lot of change and variation, because you turn up and you go, oh, this isn't what I thought I was going to get. And you change it, right? So if you can, again, minimize that change, that's kind of where you get to. So look, I'm a happy idealist, and ever since I graduated, when the first CAD drawings came out, I thought this was the thing that unlocked the future. And I've been wrong every time. Well, not wrong every time, because I think there are things that have progressed, but it's been much slower. I didn't think I'd be specializing in this in my 50s, and that you actually needed me to specialize it in my 50s. So that's it. Kind of a different way of looking at it.
Yeah. James, the last one for me is about mentors and how they, if you had any, and how they shaped what you do right now.
Oh, mentors are amazing. But you should definitely find people that are willing to. If you can find somebody who's willing to give their time to you, it's such a precious resource and commodity. And genuinely, this morning, one of my mentors messaged me overnight, and as soon as I saw his message on LinkedIn, I was going, oh, fantastic! Like, Tom's got in touch again, and that you can build something from those relationships. That's really valuable, and I think it's really incumbent on people like me to make time for people to be mentored. And it's kind of what I enjoyed a lot about High Labs, is working with one of your previous guests, like with Annalie Tostar, or with Brittany at QFlow, just when you can sort of give them a bit more help and guidance in what they're doing. I get a great deal of satisfaction out of that. So it's a very important thing, I think, for everybody to do.
Very good. Okay. James, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure. You're clearly a fountain of knowledge. Could you tell people where they could find out more about you and the work that you're doing?
So LinkedIn's a good place. LinkedIn's probably my favorite spot to update the thing. So follow my feed on LinkedIn, and then also my website, digitaltrees.io. Get in touch in other those ways.
Okay. Thank you, Dave.